So I founded CineDump back in 2015 with the idea to promote local and underground talent and activity. And today we're doing just that. Today we talk to a man that really needs no introduction, Mr. Roy Damm. Thanks for joining me today.
Thanks for having me, man.
So for those that aren't familiar, you are a little infamous online, but for those that aren't familiar, can you tell them a little bit about yourself and what you do to preserve physical media?
Well, my full introduction would probably be that I'm a pop culture historian, video archiver, and video archiving activist. What I do, I take pretty serious. I started out when I was only 14 years old. I had an obsession with the rock band Kiss. And I remember at one point, my entire life's goal was just to get a copy of Kiss Meets the Phantom on VHS. And when I finally achieved that goal, I learned that there were other people out there that were, recording things off of TV, archiving them, and making sure that you could have a copy that you could watch at home. And that was like a magic trick to me at the time. So, I became obsessed with video, and that eventually grew into me getting my own video camera and going out and filming bands for a living. I've actually worked with Marilyn Manson, Kiss, Anthrax, L7, but I've also done some unofficial work for bands like the Rolling Stones. I've shot Prince. I filmed Black Sabbath. I've pretty much filmed every major artist and a lot of bands that you've probably never heard of as well. But I traveled the country and I did that for many, many years. But I've also been along the way a big collector of physical media, movies, TV shows, you name it. That's sort of what I do. I have about 3,500 actual official Blu-rays and DVDs. But there's a lot of things out there that people want that they can't get, things that are being lost to time. I mean, things that are trapped on VHS or things that were filmed on video and can never truly be upgraded to HD. And I sort of try to do what I can to make sure that me and my friends who do this sort of collecting get the things that we want, and streaming companies really are probably the number one culprit of trying to destroy physical media. So I'm not a big fan of streaming services, even though I do have every streaming service known to man. I mean, I have them all, but the good news is I don't actually pay for any of those.
Connections, yeah. Before we jump into the kind of like the now, I want to know a little bit more about your licensing deals. So how did those get acquired? You started doing this when you were younger. How did it translate to now and over the years?
Right. Well, what happened was I filmed all of these bands. I filmed approximately 500 bands. And like I said, my biggest artists were like Kiss, Marilyn Manson, and so from when the pandemic happened, a good friend of mine by the name of Kurt Gooch, who's an author of the book Kiss Alive Forever, huge best-selling Kiss book, and he actually came to me and said, would you be interested in selling the rights to everything that you ever filmed? And at first I'm thinking, what? And he says, well, I'm involved in clip licensing. Now, I've known Kurt since I was just 18. He was one of my friends who actually helped get me involved in video collecting. And we stayed in touch over the years. And he went on to do many official projects. He worked on Kissology. Like I said, he wrote the book. He's worked with Van Halen, many other big artists. And, so he explains to me what clip licensing is. At first, I'm like, what is that? And he says, well, basically, we can take your footage and sell it for people that want to do legacy projects or documentaries about bands. And then they will license the clips of the footage that you filmed for these projects. And he explained to me that there was good money to be made in that. And he actually went to a company called Historic Films out of Greenwich, New York. And they made me a nice cash offer up front to license all of my footage and give me 20% of everything that they make from this point on. I mean, like some of the things that I filmed back in the day were Alice in Chains' final performance with Lane Staley. So that would be a good example of, without a doubt, Alice in Chains is, a shoo-in to have some sort of a legacy project in the near future, a documentary about their history, Lane Staley. So they're going to need this footage of this final performance with Lane Staley to tell their story. And that's where clip licensing becomes so important. And Historic Films has, really taken me from being an underground bootleg guy to like a legitimate guy who you could actually, pay to use my footage, which is, I'm actually the only bootlegger in history to have a legitimate licensing deal like this. I'm sure that, somewhere somebody's probably licensed some unofficial footage before me, but I'm the first guy with a huge library of live concert recordings that are actively being licensed, properly through the right channels and stuff. I mean, a lot of people know about my history with Kiss, and I guess we can touch on that for just a second. But the long story short is Kiss never actually sued me for $7,075,000. There's a story online about it, but I've been on multiple podcasts telling that story. And Kiss never actually successfully served me with paperwork or ever attempted to collect. In fact, the truth of the matter is that Kiss had been using my live concert recording footage to tell their story. And for the first time ever on the new A&E documentary, they actually had to pay $10,000 to use 3 minutes of my footage that they had used 20 times previously without payment, compensation, or credit. But now finally, even Kiss is having to pay to use that footage, which is proving the importance of underground archiving, because without that footage that I shot of those bands, they could not tell their story, which is sort of the same thing. It lends itself to archiving films and rare movies and TV appearances, because, without people that actively underground archive like this, a lot of these movies and TV shows would be lost in time forever.
Yeah, and that brings up a good point. Have companies reached out to you as like, what is your most popular release, or have actors reached out to you about maybe gathering items for them to have on their table as well?
Well, it's funny that you would mention that, because actually Shout Factory used to shop at one of my booths. Back in the day, a long time ago in a galaxy far, far away, I used to have booths at conventions and trade shows that I'm sure that I know you're a big part of the horror trade show community, Mad Monster Party, Monster Palooza, those types of shows. Well, I used to have booths at those types of shows. I no longer do that anymore, but my wife actually used to run those booths. So Shout Factory used to come to a show called Hollywood Show in Hollywood, California. And they would actually come up to the booth, and they were very cool. And they would bring a notepad and they would say, "Hey, what are your biggest sellers?" So she would literally start telling him. She's like, "The biggest seller of all time that we have is probably Decline of Western Civilization Part 1. And at the time, it really was. It was one of the biggest properties that, that we shared in an underground capacity. And, so they actually went out and got licensing for the Decline of Western Civilization trilogy. And I feel like that is a direct example of, them using the underground to follow the lead of what's hot. Yeah. I mean, a lot of these companies are running out of movies to put out, or maybe they can't put out some movies because of certain licensing issues. And that's, again, why underground archiving is so important, because a lot of red tape and rights issues is why these movies are being erased and lost to time. Let's say Blood Beach is a great example of that. There are 35 millimeter prints available. It could be scanned. It could actually happen. I mean, the director has said that the original film has been destroyed, but it could be upgraded to HD, but it is literally just a nightmare of red tape. So movies like Blood Beach that people love because of the image of the movie poster and things like that, that stuff becomes the stuff of legend. But, now the only way people can see it is, degraded VHS tapes that have been transferred to DVD. And I mean, even the DVD of Blood Beach that's officially available is anything but official. So, I mean, you can go on Amazon and buy that right now, but, it's bad quality and, it's trapped in time. So, I mean, it's actually legalities and red tape that prevent a lot of archiving from happening and getting official releases on these movies and films.
Yeah, and I think the misconception is that people think that these actors, actresses, directors just have the green light, like they're like all of this stuff is available to them. And you and I know, tracking some of this stuff down is like very, very difficult, but it's a lot of times even more difficult for someone that worked on the film.
Right. I mean, a lot of people think that just because they worked on the film that they hand you the keys to the vault and you can come in and do whatever you want, but that's not the case. I mean, a good example of that would be at one point at one of these trade shows, it was actually a Hollywood show, which was my big stomping grounds. Christy McNichol used to be one of the guests. And another movie that's kind of lost in time and has lots of rights issues would be Little Darlings, which is a big classic. It could never be made in today's day and age because it's kind of creepy. It's about two underage virgins trying to bed down their camp counselor or whatever. And at any rate, Kristen McNichol actually came to me and said, wow, you have Little Darlings on Blu-ray. We would love to sell that at our booth. So, they actually would come to the booth and purchase copies of that for her to sign at the show. I mean, she certainly didn't care about the legalities of it. And a lot of people don't, because, I mean, that's what collectors do, man. I mean, it's the underground that kind of fuels this entire thing, that we call collecting a physical media.
Yeah, and that's such a good film. It's actually one of my mother's favorite films, so that's kind of how I even am familiar with it. And I kind of want to jump to keeping that in mind. So, like myself, people like my mom who like look for these things online, they are huge fans of what you do, because if it wasn't for people like you, like me, and then everyone else, these movies would be lost. So, how do you deal with, you have just as many fans and supporters as you do people that despise what you do? How does that all work?
Well, I mean, unfortunately, we have a huge segment of toxic fandom and within the horror community, which is really, I mean, a lot of horror fans come to me, but I'm into all kinds of movies, not just horror movies. I love comedy movies, TV shows, you name it. I'm really into all of that stuff. But but there's just a lot of toxic fandom, and it happens on social media quite a bit. And someone will see people talking about, hey, I got this cool thing from Roy. But the problem being, and then they will start to complain, which they'll advocate for these multi-million-dollar companies that are actually taking away what it is that they want and love. I mean, these people that are making these complaints about what it is that I do, they actually want this stuff just as bad themselves, but they're sitting there advocating for these streaming companies and these other major film companies that have this stuff locked up in a vault, and they have no intentions of ever letting it out. And it's just rotting with time. I mean, a lot of these film elements literally are deteriorating as we speak. And, a lot of the prints that we have and the means that we have available to get these films, are disappearing, at a rapid pace, because of streaming companies and stuff. But, I mean, and a lot of people ask me, where do you get the things that you are able to archive? Well, I mean, everybody knows about torrenting sites and things like that. There are also lots of other ways to get this material. You can get a screen capturing program and capture your screen of a stream as it's actually happening on your computer, and the results can be pretty amazing. But when it comes to all of these download websites, you get a lot of these toxic fans that are saying, oh, it's free online. You can just go get it online. But the thing is that when you download these files, oftentimes you learn quickly, if you're not very tech savvy, that these are files that aren't going to play on anything that you have. Your player won't play them. It's not a disc or a tape that you can just put in and watch it by pushing the button play. It doesn't work like that. Also a lot of times, those things that get put up online, people will make what's called custom Blu-rays of these files. But unfortunately, these other customs creators that are out there don't really know what to do with these files once they get them. I mean, yes, they're able to get them to a disc and make them play for most people, but a lot of time the quality looks bad, and it gives underground archiving kind of a bad name, and people think quality can be bad. But if you know what you're doing with these kind of files, you can actually make things that, rival official releases and stuff, I mean? So I'm not saying that's right or wrong, but many people do that. I mean, you can go on Etsy right now and see people selling tons of stuff. You can go on eBay right now. Another good example would be Texas Chainsaw Massacre from Netflix. Everybody knows Netflix is never going to release that. You could probably count the Netflix releases on one hand that have ever been produced ever, of any of their movies and properties that they buy, because when they buy them exclusively to stream, which goes back to the original thing where I'm saying these streaming companies want to control everything that you love. You're not going to be able to get it. And they don't understand that there are fans out there, even the toxic fans, and they want every single Texas Chainsaw Massacre on their shelf so that they can watch it. And, they don't care about how they get it or what the legalities of it are, because in reality, At any point, Netflix could take away that Texas Chainsaw Massacre film and never show it again. And then where would it be? No one would have it. And only the people that did this underground archiving, would be able to have a copy of that. So, I mean, I always say that if you can't touch it, you don't own it. And when people come to me and say, well, it's free on streaming services, well, number one, streaming isn't free. Each and every one of these services is roughly $20, and it is their end goal and their end game to make sure that every collector in the world is giving them $20 per month for the rest of their life. And then the downside of that is you have no control in what they show you for content on these streaming services. Like I said, if they take away Texas Chainsaw Massacre 2022, fans will no longer have it unless they were able to get it through other means, So, underground archiving is very important. And these people that are complaining about it really are just, sad, pathetic bootlickers that don't really appreciate media because they have no rights to that footage. I mean, literally, they're advocating for these multi-billion-dollar and multi-million-dollar franchises to make more money in a new way, and they're never going to see a penny of it. And again, they don't realize they're giving up all of the power to these streaming companies by saying to themselves, oh, it's free on Netflix. Yeah. Well, it's not free because every month Netflix sends you a bill. But, that's pretty much what I can say about toxic fandom and people that don't like what it is that I do.
Yeah, also too with physical media, there's like streaming misconceptions about how everything is available on streaming. You and I know that that's not true.
Absolutely, it's not true. I mean, yes, a lot of things are available on streaming on Amazon, but for a premium charge, okay? I mean, the importance of having all of this media behind me and all of the media that you see behind Jessie over there. I mean, the reason why all of that physical media is so important is because if you wanted to watch, I don't know, I'm trying to think of a good example, Night of the Comet, which is owned, or the rights or the distribution rights are owned by Shout Factory. If you want to watch that, it might be available on Tubi for a short time, but if it's not, you're going to pay $5.99 to watch that movie. Yeah. And if you want to watch it more than once, now you're paying $12. If you want to watch it again next year around Halloween, now you're up to $18. So getting a physical copy becomes increasingly important because financially speaking, streaming is about making money. Nothing is free on streaming, and that's what people need to remember. Also, not everything is available. Let's take, for example, Gleaming the Cube is an excellent example of something that is lost to time right now. You can watch it on Amazon for a fee, but at the end of the video, if you watch it, I shit you not, it is actually shows you that it was taken from the DVD, poorly ripped. The quality is awful because Netflix and Amazon and Hulu and all these people, they have so much content that they have to keep compressing it. Yeah. And compressing it more and more. So the quality gets worse and worse. I mean, I don't know if people have noticed, but the free content on Amazon is pretty bad. I mean, it really is. The streams are terrible, and that is due to compression from these companies because they have, X thousands amount of movies. And every time they add another 100 or 200 movies this year, in order to control the bandwidth that they're using and the space that they have on their servers, they find new ways to compress that stuff through technology. And again, the quality keeps going downhill. I've noticed that when you pay for something on Amazon, it tends to look quite a bit better than the free content that they offer.
Yeah, and I think that we really want to get this point across that movies like The Barbarian or Prey, these movies are kept from being physical media so that you will enroll in these subscriptions and you will just be stuck paying these monthly fees. That's kind of the game plan anyway.
Right. I mean, that was definitely what I was just saying. But the guy, one of the producers for Barbarian had actually made a tweet saying that Barbarian, as far as he knew, was going to get an official release because they had behind the scenes footage, they had performed commentary tracks. But here's the thing, all of that behind the scenes stuff and those commentary tracks are available on the streaming service as we speak. Okay. What he fails to realize is that 20th Century Fox, who made Prey and made Barbarian, have openly said that they are no longer supporting physical media releases. So I knew that when that producer guy made that tweet, that was never going to happen, because that was like 6 months ago, and yet there's still no planned release, no, hey, it's coming out at the end of the year or anything like that. I mean, technically it's just not going to happen, and neither is Prey. I mean, those are both properties that are controlled by 20th Century Fox, and they are not supporting physical media, so they're not going to come out. And they make those movies and they pay to have those movies produced so that you will enroll in those programs. Again, they just think that all of this underground archiving and archiving in general and video ownership is the stuff of yesterday. It's dinosaur stuff. There's new technology. There's a new way. And of course, millions upon millions of people are subscribing to those services and giving them what they want. But they're starting to find out quickly, like when Netflix said that they weren't going to let people, share passwords. They started learning real quick that there was a major backlash to that, and things like torrent sites, which go all the way to the days of Napster and Kazaa and all of those things that have evolved over time. They know good and well that fans will go out and find that material for free, not to mention the fact that with Android streaming devices and underground apps, all of these movies are free every day at the push of a button.
Yeah.
I mean, you can literally use an Android TV box and use an underground app that has every movie in existence. And that's actually where the MPAA and these streaming services is actually, the MPAA is kind of defunct now. Yes, it still exists, but there's a company called ACE, which represents all of the streaming services. They're all part of it, okay? And, ACE is actually the one who, their entire focus is stopping these underground apps that people use on their Fire Sticks and their Android TV boxes, because that is real legitimate piracy that can harm the industry, because it makes the ease of use and access to this material to users so much more simple that that is stealing from something. Like literally getting something, making a physical copy, having it on your shelf, that kind of is dinosaur stuff. I mean, it's a niche market which keeps getting smaller and smaller, so I mean, their focus is really on stopping these Android TV apps that can stream all of these movies, which I feel is far more detrimental to the film industry and movie makers. And, even underground horror filmmakers, all of their stuff is being streamed, I mean, and the bottom line is that these streaming companies are going to leave the money on the table. If these underground filmmakers are not going to come up with enough money to make their products available, then people are going to do it whether they like it or not, by any means necessary. I mean, I'm not saying that I advocate for that, or even though I sort of do, but I'm also saying that, people are going to get this material one way or another. So, that's really, the state of the union, so to speak, on physical media and streaming at the moment.
Yeah, I want to take a quick little pivot here. I know we touched on trolls a little bit, but we mentioned that, a lot of these things are available on Etsy, on eBay, and you mentioned like the Prime Video, like all of these things being available in more ways than one. I guess my question for you is that, do you think that you are maybe attacked because you are, educated, the people that do support you are very outspoken, I feel like it's kind of odd that so many people do come after you, and it seems to me, from a spectator or from an outsider, it seems like you're always under fire for one reason or another.
Well, I mean, the bottom line is, it's pretty simple. If you're respectful to me, I will be respectful to you, okay? And I go from 0 to fuck this guy in like 60 seconds. I know that when you and I first met, we actually had words, but look at us now, sitting on a podcast, sharing the same views, feeling the same way about things, because there's a lot of good to be had within the horror community. But when you get to these toxic trolls, like I said, they're basically just bootlickers for the industry. They have no holdings on these films and stuff. And, they'll say very aggressive, angry things to me or to friends of mine. And, unfortunately, at that point, if you retaliate or say something in return, all of a sudden you're a bully.
Yeah.
You're the bad guy. But in reality, it always comes back to, someone was disrespectful to me. I mean, I don't get up every morning thinking, boy, I really hope that I can get into some shit today online. That would be so much fun. I mean, I actually get up every day and say, wow, I really hope nobody starts any trash today, because if they do, I'm going to be forced to bring the monster out of the closet, so to speak. I mean, because everybody thinks I'm such a monster, but I'm fully not, man. I mean, I'm a super respectful guy that really understands archiving, really loves movie collecting, has a gigantic physical media collection. I collect toys. I mean, any monies that I've ever made from anything I've ever done in my life has gone right back into doing what I love, which is collecting. I'm not a millionaire, I don't live in a giant house and stuff, I mean, you also have people out there, this guy lives in a basement with his parents. Well, I mean, that's clearly not the case, but at any rate, I mean, that's pretty much it in a nutshell, as far as I can tell you on toxic fandom online and social media in general.
Excellent, man. Well, yeah, I can definitely attest to what you're saying. Looking back, it was all me, because I was trolling, but we came to like an understanding, and oddly enough, we talk probably about once a week just to kind of touch base with each other, which, I like it that way, man.
Well, I mean, dude, you're not the only one, Jesse. I'm serious. I mean, I've had multiple people come to me and say, hey, man, I was wrong. I shouldn't have said that. I actually did start this issue.
Yeah.
And I brought this trouble on myself. And I honestly, guy, when they apologize, I have got many, many friends online. And, I mean, like I was saying, I have thousands and thousands of supporters. And I have a very vocal minority, less than 100 people that despise me. And you know what it is? It's because I said something creative that made them upset one day when they came at me. But again, had they not said anything, I would have never said anything to them. I wouldn't even known that they were there.
Gotcha.
Yeah,
they hate us because they ain't us, man. And like I told you yesterday, real recognize real. And I definitely appreciate your time. I love hearing your story. The more I find out, the more I get interested. So before we wrap up, I want to give you a moment to just mention anything you want. The floor is yours.
Well, I mean, I've said quite a bit here today, probably more than I should, but I mean, that's really it, man. Just, let people do what they want. Let fans be fans. Let collectors be collectors, and stop being a gatekeeper. If you're out there being a crybaby online, I mean, seriously, when you get up tomorrow, ask yourself, do I want to be a positive influence on the community, or do I want to be a negative influence on the community? Because I am truly only trying to build the collector community, bring it up to another place, make it legitimate, and make collectors happy. And I really do. I make thousands of people happy, regularly. And I love those people and they love me. And that's it, man. I mean, I really have to say that archiving and collecting has brought me more friendships and support than I could have ever expected, and has truly been a positive force in my life. I mean, 3 or 4 years ago, I was a far more aggressive, more negative person at trolling. I mean, that's when we met, but as time goes by, I start to realize that, there's so much more love and support than there is hate. And, I know I sound like a great big hippie, even though I'm supposed to be a super mean guy, but I mean, just like in reality, man, I mean, I'm a guy that believes that, basic human needs should be met. Everyone should have health care. I guess you could call me whatever. I'm not a political guy, but I just don't feel like people should suffer. And, I just think that, these big streaming companies, they know when to pick and choose their battles, right? I mean, like I said, their main focus is stopping underground apps that, can make all of their content, accessible at the ease of a button, and that they think that physical collectors are kind of dying off. And in a weird way, they kind of are. And I guess in closing, I mean, I'm sure everybody's noticed that Best Buy is raising their prices.
Yep.
More and more avenues to go out and physically purchase something in the wild, as we say, as collectors, is becoming few and far between, man. And I mean, it's like, we're doing everything we can to support physical media, but I do believe that there will always be a physical media collector game out there. But, I mean, I do foresee a day when it becomes such a niche thing that the only people that produce this stuff would be boutique labels like Severin, or Shout Factory or Vinegar Syndrome or any of those other labels. They may truly end up being the last vestige of, making these things available. So I have ultimate respect for those labels. And, I mean, I'm really only actively archiving things that I know would never be released, so or going to be lost to time, like Blood Beach, etc. I mean, those are the things that fans want. And, that's it, man. In a nutshell, just let fans be fans, let collectors be collectors, and stop all the hate online and stop being a toxic influence to your own community.
Let fans be fans. Here at CineDump, we let the doers know how they're doing. And Roy Damm, you are doing just fine. I appreciate your time, man. I've enjoyed the stories. And yeah, let's do this. Let's do this again.
Oh, for sure, man. And I've got a lot more stories. I mean, literally, I could tell you stories right now about Marilyn Manson that would make your toes curl. I was there in the back in the day. Yeah, I mean, I worked for Marilyn Manson from 1994 until 1998. Always with the promise that I would become his full-time videographer. And the long story short on that is the minute he got on the cover of Rolling Stone, his management changed. They had handlers. They started to push everybody that was close with him away. And, I mean, so, I've got just tons and tons of stories, lots of stuff about movie stars, rock stars, and I'll be happy to come back on the show anytime you want and share all of those experiences with you.
Awesome. Yeah, you guys let us know in the comments below what you want to hear first. And Roy, thanks again, man. Talk to you later, buddy.